I want to read you a text from someone who I won't say their name, but we'll just say that they're very liberal. And he says, this may sound controversial, but I'm not totally opposed to Trump's National Guard move in D.C. I know he's doing it for politics, but crime remains rampant. I've had too many friends carjacked, shot at. None of us will walk more than 3 blocks after 8 p.m. 13-year-olds are committing many of these crimes. Quite a change from a decade ago when things were much calmer. Well, that actually sounds like the D.C. that I lived in when I lived a block behind the Supreme Court. And, you know, every 3 days, one of my neighbors was getting held up at gunpoint. I mean, there has been a crime problem in D.C. At the same time, obviously, a lot of concerns. Will this look like June of 2020?
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Petersen. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network. And Wednesday, here we are. Looks like we made it. Look how far we've come to, baby. They said, I'll bet you'll never make it. Today is Wednesday, August the 13th. President Trump has officially told D.C.'s homeless that the Sidewalk Cafe is closed. The new policy, shelter, jail, or get the out. Get out. Glad to have you here today. Don't forget to click that like button. And if today is your first time watching or listening to the Wake Up America show, we hope you'll click the follow button so you'll get a notification when we go live. You'll become a regular viewer of the Wake Up America show, and we get to hang out every morning, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. Wouldn't that be fun? You know, the nation's capital isn't supposed to look like a post-apocalyptic TJ Maxx clearance sale. I love me some TJ Maxx. You know, you see me in there. Give me the damn Adidas hat, damn it. The White House says it's about restoring safety and beauty. Critics say it's cruel. We're going to talk about what Benjamin Franklin thought about driving the poor out of poverty, what Murray Rothbard had to say about the so-called right to live in squalor, and why the libertarian answer isn't handing out tents and fentanyl test strips. Maybe some Narcan. But that's just round 2 today, because round 1, Trump is also taking a big swing at the Smithsonian, and I say God bless him. Everybody remember that flag incident? Yeah, you know, the place of the Air and Space Museum, the Natural History Museum, and apparently enough bureaucrats to fill an entire exhibit called The Evolution of Red Tape. The White House is combing through their exhibits ahead of America's 250th birthday. God bless America. I love America. It's my home. So the White House is going through the Smithsonian exhibits to get ready for the 250th birthday. And this is what they say. They're trying to restore truth and sanity to American history. And you know what? You love to see it. Critics say that it's rewriting the past to fit one man's vision, but I say maybe we should ask why our taxpayer-funded vision of history is already slanted towards America being the bad guy. All right, at 8 a.m. Central Time this morning on the show, Judge Andrew Napolitano will talk us about the right to be left alone. It's about the surveillance state, which, spoiler alert, has been violating your Fourth Amendment rights and second with bipartisan enthusiasm for decades. And at 8:30 a.m., Zack Bonfilio, the Misfit Patriot, will be here for his first time on the show to discuss his fight against what he calls right-wing authoritarianism. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. We'll hear from him this morning. And then, of course, there's your favorite. And boy, oh boy, I hope Drew Van Runkle will be here to see this if we do it. If we hit $100 today, we will unlock a Defense Against the Dark Arts class unlike any you have ever seen before. Now, if we hit $75 raised, you will, of course, get to see your unlocked mini documentary, sir. Your conservative mini documentary, sir. $75 raised will unlock that. So instead of playing commercials when I go to get my guests on the Zoom call, then we will get to watch a fun little mini documentary instead. Yesterday's was about the cult that a presidential assassin had joined, Charles Guiteau, and it was a fascinating one. So if you missed that, make sure that you check out yesterday's program where you can see that little fascinating snippet of history. Today's mini documentary unlocks at $75, but the $100 bonus goal today, if I swear to God, if Drew Van Runkle misses it, it's going to be hilarious, because today's class will be led by Professor Mortimer Puffcap. He is a centuries-old sentient mushroom who's been sporing wisdom on liberty since before the Magna Carta was just a spore in the wind. He's grumpy, he smells faintly of whiskey, and he once debated John Locke while growing out of a log. Today, if the bonus unlocks, then he's offering 2 possible lessons for you to choose from. I'll drop those in the Discord for you to vote on. Option A, the spore of subsidy addiction, how government handouts seem sweet at first, but leave a society rotting from the inside. And option B, the root rot of regulatory capture, where industries wrap their roots around the state until the laws protect them instead of you. So you get to vote for which one you want in the For Liberty Network Discord. And make sure that you join that for us today. The For Liberty Network Discord is an absolute blast. It's been popping off lately. It's nice to see a community growing over there. And if you don't have the link to it, then it's because I didn't post it. And I'll have to do that right now because, I don't know, maybe I was too lazy or I just forgot. There it is. The Discord is there. You guys are going to get to vote in the poll when I drop that one. But in order to distract you from me dropping the poll over there in the Discord, I will play a clip.
Fact that, the people that are cheering this on privately, not like right-wing Republicans, are not MAGA people. A lot of our friends are in the media, and also Democrats that worked on Joe Biden's campaign, that worked on other campaigns, that are saying, yeah, I'd like to feel safe walking around this city. If the federal government can be a positive partner in keeping the streets safe, while, again, forming a partnership with the D.C. police and not taking over, then I at least the people I've spoken with that live in D.C. day in, day out, see this as a positive.
I think it's also reasonable to be concerned.
I will just go back to the
Democrats want to be safe in D.C. Here's a D.C. resident.
We need all the protection that we can get in the city because the city is really getting dangerous. A person like me at this age, I have to make sure to come home before sundown. We need all the...
Have to make sure. Can you imagine having to live somewhere where you have to make sure that you come home before sundown? Here is a former police chief from Washington, D.C.
What's your sense of how this will work?
Well, I will tell you that after listening to the press conference yesterday, I feel much better this morning. Just in the last 24 hours, Chief Pam Smith of the Metropolitan Police Department has spoken with Terry Cole, the interim commissioner for the Metropolitan Police Department, at least for the next 30 days. They have spoken. They have Mr. Cole has told Chief Smith that we would like MPD to lead this effort. He wants this to be a collaboration, and frankly, that's the only way I see this as being successful. As a former police chief, if somebody would have come to me and said, "Hey, we're going to bring 500,000 more law enforcement officers in to assist you," what's not to like about that? You could certainly make an impact on crime with that kind of surge. But this is going to be a temporary thing. Make no mistake about that. This is not something that can be sustained over a long period of time. So
Chief, good morning.
I'm very...
Sorry, Chief, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged that that Chief Smith and Mr. Cole have talked about this being a collaboration, and that MPD is going to basically lead the decisions on how these resources are deployed.
All right, so that is from the former police chief of Washington, D.C. Before we get to the homeless topic, and the cleanup of D.C. Real quick, let's talk about history, not the kind that you read in a dusty book, but the kind you live when you walk into a museum. I have loved museums ever since I was a child, and I have visited Washington, D.C. Ever since I was a child, and I've lived in Washington, D.C. Ever since my father and my grandfather would take me to Civil War battlefields to walk the battlefields, and my grandfather held a copy of a history book and told us about the battles that were there and what had happened right in the spot where we had stood. I have been in love with American history, and the Smithsonian museums are a staple of any tour that I give. For example, this year I led the AP for DC Liberty Tour. We had a fantastic time. People came from all over the country to visit Washington, D.C., and we visited the Smithsonian Museum of American History. And what I thought would be a completely normal and routine trip turned into anything but. I will give you some more details about what happened to me in just a few minutes on this one. But first, let's get to the news angle on this one. The White House announced that it's going to be conducting a full-scale review of the Smithsonian Institution ahead of America's 250th birthday. And if you think this is just about double-checking the spelling or making sure everything's clean, no. This is about making sure that the story that is going to be told inside those marble halls actually reflects American exceptionalism, not the watered-down, guilt-soaked narratives that the curators have been pushing for years. You walk over to the FDR exhibit and you see the New Deal and how amazing the works progress, the workers programs, the NRA before the NRA, all of the massive government projects, the wars, there's plenty of space afforded to them. But when you go to the lonely hall of industry, of American industry, that you'd almost forget that America was a nation of builders, right? Milton Friedman has to be balanced out with Robert Fourth Reich. It's always an opinion that is biased against the conservative, the libertarian, the right-wing, anything view of American history, while left-wing, leftist history, leftist victories are celebrated, brought out into the open with massive exhibits, and taxpayer funding expenditure knows no limits. So the Smithsonian, it's not like it's just some local history club, right? We're talking about the crown jewel of America's museums. There are 19 of them, and they contain hundreds of millions of artifacts. And a lot of these are papers, but our tax dollars are funding this. Your kids' field trips are going to be to Smithsonian's, and for a lot of visitors, this is their first and maybe their only in-depth exposure to American history, because so many people who travel from overseas who come here are going to see things that you and I know. We know the story of the New Deal. We know the story of Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society. We know the truth is different from the propaganda that they teach us in our government schools here. So what do we want? Not just our children and our own grandchildren to see, but what do we want the world to know? Or what do we want the world to think about the United States, right? So the people who control what's on display at the museums, they aren't just showing you objects, right? They're controlling the national memory. And I have seen this bias firsthand. When I visited the Museum of American History in D.C., I was carrying this literal American flag, and I was told to put it away, not because it's blocking anyone's view, not because it was a safety hazard or anything. I wasn't waving it in people's faces or anything, right? But I was told by the security guard, I was using this to signal to my group where I was so that they could find me. I was told by a security guard that this was not appropriate for the American History Museum in Washington, D.C. Many of you already heard this story. If you're regular viewers, you know this, but I have to repeat it because for those who have not heard this story, this is a true story. It happened to me. I have witnesses. Stephanie was standing right next to me. The security guards told me to put this away because it wasn't appropriate. Right? The flag of the country whose history you're supposedly celebrating is considered out of place. And that is the kind of subtle cultural rot that this review that Trump is conducting is aimed at correcting. I wonder if I inspired that at all. And here's the reality. These places, they're not neutral. Right? Every exhibit is a choice. What you include, what you leave out, and how you phrase the text, which images you use, all of it sends a message. And for years, the Smithsonian's message has been marinated in the fashionable academic narrative: America as oppressor, the West as villain, and history as one long indictment of our values. Critics like Harvard's Tia Miles said, the Smithsonian has never reflected one man's view. That's really cute, right? But it's a dodge. It's been reflecting one ideological view for decades, and it's time for us to have a little bit of a turnaround. What do you guys say? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Send me a text, 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. We're grateful for that. Y2 Joe said, always a great day after a Royal Series win and towards the bonus content. Great, yes. He kicked in. What I recommend you guys do if you want to help unlock that bonus content fast is you head to the Liberty Shop at forlibertyshop.com and buy yourself a box of Founding Flavors. I'm all hopped up on Jeffersonian Java this morning. It's delicious. I'm not addicted. Let's unlock that bonus content early and often so Drew Van Runkle can meet his coming. I'm just guessing that it will be his favorite professor in the class of the Defense Against Dark Arts today. Check out our collections over at forlibertyshop.com. Alligator Alcatraz, super hot. The Gulf of America beach towels, so hot this summer. If you go to the Liberty Shop and you make purchases, if the purchases add up to $100 during the live stream, then that will unlock the bonus content. Just an FYI, I can't see Amazon sales, unfortunately. So I don't know if people buy or they don't buy. So I can't see them until like 24 or 48 hours after. So if you buy one of those, unfortunately, it doesn't count towards the bonus content because I have no way of knowing. I mean, you could just tell me, and I just have to believe you. But if we hit $75, that will unlock the bonus content, and then tomorrow, and then we will hit $100. That will unlock the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Good morning, John Rail. Nice to see you, brother. Hope that my tips, AI tips, are helping you out. Drew Van Runkle says he's tired after talking with his Argentine friend on Discord all night last night. That's right. And if you're on our Discord. If you're on our Discord, then you guys will have an opportunity to chat with each other and vote on the poll for today's Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Okay, right. Let's get back to where we were. So, why does the cultural war matter? This has been a big discussion and debate in right-wing politics for 20 years, 30 years, maybe, for all I know. I've only been in it for 20 years, but since the beginning of my political career in 2007. 2008, the question of whether or not people like ourselves should be involved in a cultural war has raged. And I have come down on the side that it matters and that it's important for people like ourselves to be engaged in the struggle for cultural supremacy. That's not what some people mean when they talk about supremacy, but when I talk about cultural supremacy, I'm talking about the supremacy of American culture. And who defines what American culture is? Well, it's the people who control our museums. It's the people who write the music. It's the people who produce our movies. It's the people who produce our talk radio shows. It's the people who produce our podcasts. It's the people who produce our culture. So culture is what happens once we have started to meet our base needs. You can have cultures that aim at solving base needs, solving the problems of base needs, the things on the bottom of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I know we have a good rice culture, so we're not all starving to death. Okay, great. But what happens once you've solved all of those material needs, or at least to a certain extent, you solve those material needs, then out of that comes beauty and art and philosophy. And culture, the things that make civilization worth living. If all we ever did was just grow and pick rice, it would feel as if That was all the meaning was. That was the whole point of human living. But we are meant for much more than picking rice and satisfying our base needs. We're meant for much more than just taking food into one end of us and then letting it out the other. We're more than just robots garbaging in and garbaging out. We are creatures of creation, and we are creatures that create. Politics is downstream from culture, and we are obligated with a duty, I believe, to step in to not just defend American culture, but also to create American culture. I may be doing it only in my own humble way, but certainly my wife, Stephanie, and I are stepping into the culture wars by productively, not just by trying to deconstruct what the left is doing, but we try and step into the culture wars by creating our own version of culture. And sometimes I see that we make sales of our Calvin Coolidge children's book, for example, and I know that we didn't do anything necessarily to earn it, other than just we made the book and managed to get it on Amazon. But the thing about it is, when people purchase this book and we didn't go out there and say, hey, please buy our Calvin Coolidge kids book, that this piece of culture makes its way into the hands of some family out there or some child who will be inspired by Calvin Coolidge. It would have never happened before. Right? And, you know, if I wish I could sell 1 million copies of this, not just for financial reasons, but just because I would love for children in the United States to learn more about this and learn more about Grover Cleveland, because they certainly don't talk a lot about this president in your schools. Almost not at all. Basically doesn't even get a mention, even though he's probably one of the most conservative thinkers, conservative and most important conservative figures of the 20th century. And yet he gets almost no time. Look at what happens to Grover Cleveland in our public education systems. Do we hear about Grover Cleveland? No. Do we hear about the Gilded Age? Only for a passing mention, because what they really call it in our educational textbooks, I don't know about yours, but certainly mine, my history books in my public schools didn't call it the Gilded Age, other than maybe a passing mention. They called it the age of robber barons. More like the not so Wild West. It was a fact. America has had ages where it has been more free than others. And from the late 1860s until 1913, America was the freest country that had ever lived, had ever existed. And ever since 1913, the United States has been on the slow and plodding road to serfdom. It's time to turn it around. Learn about Grover Cleveland, get a copy of Grover the No President, teach your kids about American history, the history that matters, the history that is our history, our legacy. I mean, why do you think that I work so hard to produce, working hard to produce the Battle of Athens documentary, which, by the way, is coming together very nicely. Can't wait for the marketing phase of that one to ramp up. But I want to tell more stories. I want to make more movies about our heroes. So we need more, realistic documentaries of Murray Rothbard. How many times have you seen one that wasn't some dry, boring for like autistic libertarians? We need to take our ideas. We need to champion our ideas. Otherwise, it will be another left-wing documentary that either, if it mentions us in passing, it mentions us like Milton Friedman next to Robert Reich in the American History Museum, and it's a terrible, terrible depiction of our ideas. Yeah, Y2 Joe says they barely talked about them when I was in school. They made the Roaring 20s seem like it was a bad thing. Thankfully, I didn't listen. Good for you. I could tell. Good for you. The Roaring 20s. God, I wish that we could be a Roaring 20s. Instead, it stops and starts and fits and starts, and everybody seems willing to give up their freedoms left and right. It's a sad thing to see. Ike Giving a Shits is also asking for positive vibes for him at 9 a.m. Eastern. He has his final interview for a career move. Big opportunity. More Rumble rants coming your way, hopefully. Well, since it's in my best interest. No. Ike, we do wish you well, brother, and thank you so very much for all your support you've given us to this point. So why does this matter beyond the museum walls, this Smithsonian topic? because politics is downstream from culture. Javier Milei has said this. Javier Milei has given interviews on this, and he is the most politically successful libertarian in all of history. Can we get a God bless Javier Milei? Somebody from Japan yesterday bought tens of thousands of yen worth. How much is that in American dollars? Of Javier Milei gear. They love him over there. They love Javier Milei. Anybody with like mutton chops and acts like a rock star and is wielding a chainsaw and is the president of a country, that's the kind of culture that Japan admires and is into. Come on, America. If this were the 1980s, Javier Milei would have been imported here to the United States. We would have given a TV show and he would have been the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. But maybe it's better that he's in Argentina so he can cut the government. Look at the Soviet Union from history. They didn't just run the factories. They ran the history books. They ran the art galleries. The composers. In Nazi Germany, Joseph Goebbels understood that you don't hold power by force alone. You hold it by saturating the culture with your narrative. Chairman Mao, he wiped out centuries of cultural tradition in the name of the Cultural Revolution. Because if you erase the past, or if you rewrite it, you control the future. Now, I'm not saying that, I'm not comparing the Smithsonian to those brutal regimes, right? But I am saying that the principle is the same. If you control the cultural story, you control the nation's direction. And right now, those stories have been tilted to undermine the very foundation of American confidence. So here's what's happening in practice. The White House letter to the Smithsonian's leadership calls for exhibitions that reflect unity, progress, and the enduring values that define the American story. They want to strip out all of the gay race communism, and all of the race-centered ideological framing, and replace it with a fact-based, patriotic, uplifting narrative. They're not just looking at the exhibits themselves. They're also reviewing their artist grants, which good for them. They could probably stand to do a little trimming around the hedges there. They're going to look at their curatorial processes. I love this. I wish I could be the person doing this. The focus is going to be on 8 museums, including the American History Museum. Get them, guys. Get them. Go get them. Go get them. Go team. Go team. Go Trump. Go Trump. Make America great again. Air and Space and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Oh, no. How are you going to have a non-race-based centered approach to the race-based centered museum? They're going to do walkthroughs, conduct voluntary curator interviews, and yeah, they're going to be looking for language that undermines the executive order's goal of restoring truth and sanity to American history. The Smithsonian says that they're committed to scholarly excellence and factual accuracy. All right, well, fine. Then good. But let's be honest. Facts aren't enough if they're selectively presented to create a political impression. There is this thing called a lie by omission. By not mentioning the other side in these discussions, you lie. You lie. You don't fill in any of the context. You don't explain why the Roaring Twenties roared. And you don't give Milton Friedman, who in so many ways built modern capitalism, his due. Can I get an amen? Hi, Steffi. We were just talking about the Smithsonian, DC. Trump's cleaning up the Smithsonian. So I was just telling them the story, talking about this in context of them telling me that I had to put the American flag away because it was inappropriate. Stephanie, you were there. You were my witness. And we had another witness that was not my wifey. Don't forget to keep dropping those Rumble rants, guys. We've raised about a buck of the $75 and $100 bonus content goals. Hopefully we'll hit those today so that Drew Van Runkle can see his upcoming, I know it's going to be his favorite professor, and vote in the Discord poll to decide which of the topics he is going to teach. You can find that Discord. The link I will drop over in the Rumble chat here in just a few seconds. So here's the libertarian angle on all of this one, right? So the libertarian in me says that the federal government shouldn't be in the museum business at all. Oh, no, God, Austin. What will we do? If it were up to me, these institutions would be privately owned, funded voluntarily, and then compete in the marketplace of ideas. No taxpayer funding, means no political control. I would pay to go to a museum. I've paid to go to museums all the time. And this is the key. As long as the Smithsonian is taxpayer funded and under government oversight, then the elected leadership will set the tone for the museum. And in that reality, the reality that we live in here, just being real, I would rather see a tone of patriotism than one of perpetual apology. This isn't about replacing one version of propaganda with another. It's about pushing back about the propaganda that's already been entrenched. If you think it doesn't matter, just remember, kids who grow up believing that their country is irredeemably evil won't defend it. They won't protect it, and they won't preserve the freedoms that they enjoy. So what are the stakes? Stakes are very high. The stakes are very, very high. America's 250th anniversary is coming in 2026. That's a once-in-a-generation chance to define the story that we tell ourselves. If those exhibits are dominated by narratives of guilt and grievance, then the cultural backdrop of the next decade will be one of decline. But if they tell the story of a nation that overcame its flaws to become the freest, most prosperous society in history, then you set the stage for political victories that reinforce those values. What happens on an individual level can happen on a collective level. If you believe that you can accomplish certain things, if you believe in yourself, then quite frequently you will succeed. Not always. Some people, it doesn't always happen. It just you can't substitute hard work and all these other things for just good feelings. But the fact is that if you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else believe in you? If you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else believe in you? Right? Winning the cultural war doesn't just mean winning in art galleries or in lecture halls. It means building an emotional and intellectual foundation for political wins down the line. You can't legislate patriotism into people who have been trained to hate their own heritage, but you can inspire it. You can inspire patriotism by letting people see the full, unvarnished, and yes, uplifting truth about their country. So yes, I want the government out of the museum business, but until that happens, I'm not going to whine when the guy in the Oval Office says, hey, maybe the American Museum of History should actually be proud of America. I'm not going to shed tears because woke curators who say that the American flag is inappropriate, that they might have to answer a few questions about the Wright brothers story that might be, it's not framed as an environmental tragedy, right? Or why the Star-Spangled Banner is displayed like an artifact of a bygone era instead of a living symbol. Am I right? Come on, guys. I feel like I'm dropping some bombs over here. It's nice to see Jimmy Joe Patty and Real Hunter Human hanging out with us this morning alongside my lovely wife, Steffi P. for Liberty. I've given a shits and so many others. Don't forget to click that like button if you haven't done so already. We'd be glad to have you click the follow button as well if you haven't, to come back and join us 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. That is the schedule of the Wake Up America show. All right. So the museums aren't neutral. They pretend to be neutral, but they're not neutral. It's like the mainstream media. They lie by omission. They pretend to be neutral, but in reality, they are only presenting you with one side of the story. You know me, I'm always rattling cages over here, guys. Waving my American flag and getting myself in trouble for being, Austin Petersen. Steelbringer, thanks for the tip, buddy boy. We've raised $6 towards the $75 and $100 bonus content goal. Jimmy Joe Patty says he's enjoying Revere's Revolutionary Roast. He's got a subscription. That's a great idea. All right, you've been thinking about how to protect your freedom and your assets from government control. Here's an event that you need to check out. It's called the Expat Money Online Summit. I will be speaking there. It's hosted by Mikkel Thorup of the Expat Money Show. This year's focus is Latin America. I got an exciting email from somebody in Buenos Aires just yesterday. Everybody's looking at Latin America these days. You know why? Because libertarianism is growing in Latin America. Thanks to Javier Milei. Give it up. Give it up. Hey, my boy, Javier. Mikkel is going to be teaching how to get a second residency. Some of us might be thinking about that, or a passport, how to legally eliminate your taxes, how to invest in overseas real estate, and open offshore bank accounts legally. And I will be there on a special VIP panel to talk about Trump's plans for Latin America. The event's totally free. The website is expatmoneysummit.com. That's expat, E-X-P-A-T, expatmoneysummit.com. And if you want the VIP ticket for all the bonus content they're going to use the code Austin, use my name. You'll get 20% off that. That's expatmoneysummit.com. The code is Austin. So, all right, break time. We haven't unlocked the bonus content just yet, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about Trump's new shelter, jail, or get the out homeless plan for DC. I'm bringing Benjamin Franklin, Murray Rothbard, and all of the most realistic libertarian views that you can find in the world today. Hey, that guy, he's Austin Petersen. Oh, he's a libertarian. Yeah, but he's a cool libertarian. You know, it's like those cool moms from Mean Girls. I'm not a regular libertarian. I'm a cool libertarian. We'll be right back. It's the Wake Up America Show's For Liberty Network. Unlock that bonus content. Patriots.
Here at Alligator Alcatraz, the fence keeps them in. But slip up, and you're on my plate.
Looks like breakfast is making a run for it. We got 3 hot meals trying to check out early from Alligator Alcatraz.
They can splash, they can sprint, but there's no escaping Alligator Alcatraz. Caught 2.
The third?
The swamp's got its own way of catching runaways.
Mama was wrong. Gators don't need toothbrushes. Just an honest job making America great again.
This summer isn't about sunscreen and safe spaces. It's about liberty, laughs, and looking like a red, white, and righteous badass. Welcome to the Summer of Freedom collection. Beach towels bold enough to trigger a liberal arts professor. Tank tops louder than a 4th of July fireworks finale. And mugs that scream, "Don't tread on my caffeine." Whether you're storming the sandbar or just grilling like George Washington with a Bluetooth speaker, this is the gear that lets everyone know. You're not here to play woke. You're here to play cornhole with conviction. So crack open a cold one, fire up the freedom, and rock the merch that makes communists cry. The Summer of Freedom is here. And it's absolutely unapologetic.
Command is now?
What does that mean?
Well, is it Pam Bondi speaking to the mayor from you, or how does this work?
So the executive order is clear. The president has requested MPD services, and our home rule charter outlines the process. The president designated Attorney General Bondi as his proxy to request services through me.
That's what the chain of command is now?
What does that mean?
Well, is it Pam Bondi speaking to the mayor from you, or how does this?
That's the chief of police in D.C. doesn't know what chain of command means? Squeeze me. Good morning, pineapples. Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. It's your host, Austin Petersen. I don't think we're going to hit the bonus content goals today, guys. I'm a little nervous. If we don't, it goes away forever. Can you imagine Drew Van Runkle not getting to see Professor, a magic mushroom professor? That would be a tragedy, so make sure that you do it. All right, let's get into it. The big story that everyone in D.C. is talking about. President Trump has told the city's homeless population, you got 3 choices: shelter, jail, or get the out.
So starting today at 12 giant grocery stores in D.C. and Maryland, if you have a bag over 14 inches, you cannot take it inside the store. So what does that look like? Here's a backpack, 14 inches. This one can't go in. Also, if you're under 18 years old, you cannot go into the store after 6 p.m. without an adult. Giant store leaders say it is all because of thieves, and shoppers we spoke to say all these new rules, these are a small price to pay.
It's a private business. they can set their own rules.
A white girl shopper wants to feel safe.
You know, if you don't like it, shop somewhere else.
Yeah.
It would also keep prices down for us as a consumer. And I think
white girl knows her economics too. Girl, you don't want those. You don't want to be culturally enriched while you're shopping at the Giant.
The stores are trying to do the best that they can to help the consumer out. And if that's what it takes, then that's what they have to do.
I'm for anything that works. If it makes anything better for the community, and if it works for the kids to keep the kids from coming in, I think because you should teach the kids not to steal. So
simple, right?
Yeah, anything that works for the community and everybody else.
It's unfortunate because apparently a lot of theft has been happening, and that's the reason why. So they got to do something. Otherwise, we won't have a Giant. So to prevent it from closing, I don't blame them.
There you go. Did you guys see that the government-owned grocery store in Kansas City yesterday had to shut its store? They got millions of dollars in subsidies. This is the Sunfresh in Kansas City. And they got millions of dollars in subsidies, and they could not make a profit. And so the Sunfresh has now closed down. And have we learned our lessons? No. Are we going to see Zoran Mandani win mayor of New York City and open up a government grocery store there and have the exact same failed experiment? Yeah. It's sad. It's so sad. All right. So, but before the pearl clutchers start freaking out about the whole criminalizing poverty angle on this one, let's look at what's actually happening here. DC already has laws on the books. The code 22-1307, and I did my homework here, and the municipal regulation 24-100 that makes it illegal to camp out on public property. These aren't new laws. They've been ignored for years while encampments spread across the city. Trump's administration is saying we're just going to enforce those laws. Homeless individuals are going to be given a choice: go to a shelter and be offered addiction or mental health services, or refuse and face fines or jail. That's it. So if you've been to DC lately, you know the drill. Tent cities in front of federal buildings, needles on the sidewalk, people shouting at invisible demons in broad daylight, and commuters are stepping over human waste on their way to work. The capital of the most powerful nation on earth looks like a mix between a failed city and an open-air asylum. And yet, the political establishment has treated this like it's just another weather pattern or something. This is something that you can only manage, but you can never solve this problem. Let's go back, since I love history, let's go back to Ben Franklin, a man who knew a thing or two about human nature. In 1766, 10 years later, stuff got real interesting. Franklin wrote that in his experience, the more public provisions are made for the poor, the less they provide for themselves and, of course, become poorer. In other words, if you make it easy to live without working or changing your self-destructive habits, you're going to get more people who are living without working or changing those habits. Franklin wasn't cruel. He believed in charity, but it was targeted charity that aimed to help people help themselves. He saw dependency as a kind of spiritual rot. And you know what? Franklin was right. Thank you, Andy, who says Marxism must be discredited utterly in its guise. All its guises economically, academically, and culturally. Push back AP. Well, damn, that's what I be doing, boy. Thanks for your support, my friend. So that means we've raised $26 towards the bonus content goal. Thank you very much for that, Andy. And once we hit 75, you unlock the mini documentary. And then 100 is the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, which you guys can vote on in the poll to see which class it is that you would like to see if we hit the $100 bonus content goal. So hopefully we'll do it. The best way to do it, my opinion, is to go to forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Get yourself something real nice from the Liberty Shop, and we will hit that bonus content goal. You get to see your Defense Against the Dark Arts class today. You don't want to miss it. Today's is going to be really special and fun. Okay. Where was I? So, all right, let's. I had to look at Murray Rothbard's on this one because I knew that he had said a lot of controversial things about homeless people, saying like arrest them, throw them in jail, I think Murray Rothbard would have absolutely loved Donald Trump. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Rothbard argued that the state distorts every market it touches. And yeah, there is actually a market for homelessness. Cities actually create it with policies that attract and then sustain homelessness. They don't enforce vagrancy laws. They have taxpayer-funded needle programs. And then they have an endless pipeline of free handouts that require zero accountability. In Rothbard's view, this wasn't compassion. This is a coercion against taxpayers to subsidize a lifestyle that often includes criminal behavior. And it's not just an economic problem. It's also a private property right problem, because public spaces or where we all go, we're all paying for this. And frequently the homeless will then encroach from the public spaces into the private spaces next door. I mean, nobody has a right to monopolize the sidewalk and prevent people from walking down the street. You know, to impede travel as a private citizen is a no-no. It should be a crime. If people are trying to walk down the street and a homeless person is standing in the middle of the street blocking them all from doing so, that's a criminal offense. Right? You're stopping people's natural right to travel, which the judge will be joining us here in just a few minutes to discuss. We're going to talk to Judge Andrew Napolitano, one of my favorite repeat guests, a man who's been warning about the dangers of surveillance states long before it was fashionable. Judge Andrew Napolitano is a former New Jersey Superior Court judge. He's a best-selling author, a nationally syndicated columnist, and one of the most principled constitutionalists in the country. Judge Napolitano will be joining us live in 5. Keep dropping those Rumble rants or go shopping at the Liberty Shop so that we don't have to watch commercials, because mini documentaries are more fun, and they unlock at $75 raised. We've raised 26 so far. And of course, if we hit 100, you get to see the magical defense against the dark arts class. We'll be right back with Judge Napolitano to talk about the surveillance state on the Wake Up America show's 4 Liberty Network. Legend has it, back in 1773. Picture this. It's 1776. Thomas Jefferson is hunched over his desk at Monticello, ink-stained fingers, writing the most radical document in human history. Do you really think he was sipping Starbucks? No. He was drinking something bold, something black, something brewed strong enough to fuel a revolution. That's the spirit behind Founding Flavors, our signature line of liberty-fueled coffee. No soy froth, no climate guilt, no corporate slogans. Just real coffee, inspired by the men who wrote freedom into existence. Every cup is a quiet protest. Against mediocrity, against tyranny, against bad coffee. So this morning, skip the globalist brew. Grab something worthy of a free man's sunrise. Founding Flavors. Now brewing at 4libertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways?
This summer isn't about sunscreen and safe spaces. It's about liberty, laughs, and looking like a red, white, and righteous badass. Welcome to the Summer of Freedom collection. Beach towels bold enough to trigger a liberal arts professor. Tank tops louder than a 4th of July fireworks finale. And mugs that scream, "Don't tread on my caffeine." Whether you're storming... Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Petersen. Thank you so very much for joining us live here today and for putting up with those commercials while we wait to get to the main event. Every Wednesday on the Wake Up America show, we have a segment that we lovingly call Big Brain Time, where we get away from all of the boring news headlines that tell you, oh, the same thing you'll see in the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Kansas City Star or the Chicago Tribune. You'll see the same story repeated over and over again. They're just repeating what the Associated Press tells them. In order to hear what's happening in the world these days, you can't read the legacy media. You don't watch the mainstream media. What you do is you watch podcasts like Judging Freedom or the Wake Up America show. It just so happens that the host of one of the most popular podcasts, it's got to be one of the biggest podcasts in the world, Judge Andrew Napolitano, joining us live here on the Wake Up America show. Good morning, Judge. Nice to see you again.
Good morning, Austin. Thank you again for the generous introduction, and thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure, my dear friend.
Judge, glad to have you here today. So I'm going to play devil's advocate on this one, Judge, and say that going to Washington, D.C. shouldn't have to be a war zone, that people who want to be able to shop for groceries shouldn't, if you own a grocery store, you should be allowed to say, hey, curfew, no kids underage. And, you know, people shouldn't have to get beat up in the streets and the type of crime that you have. Homelessness. I mean, even Murray Rothbard towards the end of his life was like, take the homeless, drive them out, send them out, arrest them, throw them away, dregs the society, push them away. I mean, he was the anarcho-capitalist king. And even he, my guess is that he would have loved Donald Trump and probably loved this tactic to clean up the streets of Washington, D.C. So what do you say, Judge? Are you with Rothbard or against Rothbard?
I can't imagine that Rothbard would have been in favor of the president exercising authority that is not granted to him under the Constitution. So this is the unusual or unique presidential behavior that is lawful but unconstitutional. Lawful because Congress has authorized it. Unconstitutional because Congress didn't have the power to have the president become the police commissioner, because that is not listed by little Jimmy Madison under the powers granted to the president in the Constitution. If he can become the police commissioner of Washington, D.C., can he become the police commissioner of Jefferson City, Missouri, or Chicago, Illinois, or Bloomfield, New Jersey? I mean, what is to stop him from putting troops in the streets wherever he wants? The troops are profoundly unlawful because of an 1876 statute, which ended the military occupation of the South, commonly called Reconstruction. And the agreement was that troops would never again be used anywhere in the United States for ordinary law enforcement. He's violated that. He's exceeded the authorities granted to him under the Constitution by becoming a police commissioner. It'll be very interesting to see what happens on the 33rd day, because this unique statute, which was signed by President Richard Nixon in 1973, that effectively granted D.C. home rule, only allows him to become the police commissioner for 32 days. After that, he needs the consent of both houses of Congress, and this would be subject to the filibuster rules in the Senate. So I don't know what the Democrats are going to do. Maybe Democrats agree with you and they don't care about constitutional authority. They just care about how dangerous things are in the streets, and they want to clean up no matter what the cost to liberty or what the cost to precedent.
I remember the quote now. I was able to pull it up. Libertarian right-wing economist Rothbard says that the police should be administered on the homeless to, quote, clear the streets of bums and vagrants. In regards to where they would go, Rothbard's reply merely said, who cares? So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that an anarchist like Rothbard would not care about the Constitution. I'm glad to hear that you defend it, because so very few people actually do. But in regards to the president's authority over Washington, D.C., it's not a state. So my understanding is that he couldn't take over Chicago or Kansas City or St. Louis because the powers of the states supersede any kind of authority, the federal authority to police our
that is essentially correct. The 10th Amendment is irrelevant to D.C. because it's not a state. On the other hand, the president is limited to the authorities granted to him by the Constitution, and this is not among them. And Congress cannot expand them. The president loves the concept of emergency. Do you know that we still are in a COVID emergency declared by Donald Trump in his first term? Now, he just declared an emergency in Washington, D.C. We're in an economic emergency that he declared because of the imbalance of trade, even though we've had an imbalance of trade since 1934. So it's not sudden, it's not unexpected, it's not an emergency, it's not even anything bad, but he declares whatever he wants to be an emergency and then claims this gives him more power from some source, not the Constitution, to do whatever he wants.
Thank you, John.
Rothbard, also didn't believe in the police. He believed in private police. So if he's talking about private police removing people from proximity to your property because these bums would reduce the property value, there's nothing unlibertarian about that. The problem would be using the power of the government to move people against their will from public property. So, I love Rothbard and would defend him to the skies. I would need to do more reading as to exactly what the hell he was talking about.
Well, you know about the paleo strategy. I mean, in the 1990s, Rothbard and Ron Paul and Lou Rockwell and the Mises people, they were, many of them call them the progenitors of the MAGA movement as it is today. Rothbard wrote explicitly his columns of why he supported David Duke, for example, and why he also supported Pat Buchanan. And didn't he even support the segregationist? What was the name of the presidential candidate from, was it the 50s and 60s, who was the segregation today, tomorrow, and forever?
Well, that's George Wallace.
George Wallace.
Yeah, he probably supported them because of their narrow view of federal powers, which he had and which you and I have, and which James Madison tried to imbue in the Constitution itself. Rothbard was against the Civil Rights Act of 64, as I believe you are, as am I, because it's the feds regulating private property. And they have no authority to do that. If I want to exclude all Catholics from my bookstore, it would be crazy to do that, but I have the right to do so. Not under the Civil Rights Act of 64, but under ordinary property law.
Right. It's just, it's fascinating because the political winds have changed. So many people who are in power in politics can trace their ideological lineage to Ron Paul, but they are much more akin to Pat Buchanan in their views of foreign policy and economic policy. So, for example, the foreign policy of someone like a J.D. Vance right now is very close to almost a Rothbardian foreign policy. These are the right-wing populists, right? They're very anti-Israel. They're very anti-AIPAC. They're very big fans of Thomas Massie, but they don't agree with Thomas Massie on tariffs or economics. So, for example, they're much more with Patrick Buchanan when it comes to the questions of tariffs or economic nationalism or regulations and antitrust. That's why the Trump administration are such big fans of Lena Khan, and they're huge fans of antitrust laws because they see this as a way for conservatives, populist types, to take control of the institutions of power, and rather than be like George Washington and step away from power, to take away power, to use a Lord of the Rings reference, to throw the ring of power into the fire rather than use it, the right-wing populists who trace their ideological lineage to Rothbard and are related to Ron Paul, but the only thing they agree with Ron Paul is on foreign policy, those are the people in power now politically, not Tea Partiers, not us, right, who believe in free markets and free economics.
I basically agree with what you said, with the exception of J.D. Vance. I'm just not a fan of his. You're telling me that this guy doesn't support the genocide in Gaza? What the hell has he done to stop it? Nothing. All he does is stand behind Trump. He just stands behind Trump wearing the same necktie Trump wears with his jacket unbuttoned like Trump's and says the same thing Trump does. But that's the job of the vice president today. If he ends up like Mike Pence, he'll be isolated and won't have any power whatsoever. But I don't know what he honestly believes. If something were to happen to Trump, the country does not know what they'd be getting in the White House.
Yeah, it's just fascinating because of the overlap. I mean, when I read Murray Rothbard, I read almost everything he had written in my earliest years of libertarianism. He specifically laid out a political strategy that ultimately became successful, but it was because of the Buchananites, because libertarians, American libertarians specifically, have always had this overlap with the paleo-conservatives like Pat Buchanan, not on trade or economics, but on foreign policy, right?
Yes. But look at our foreign policy today. We're fighting a proxy war against Ukraine. It's not going to stop on Friday. We're funding genocide in Gaza. We are war criminals in Gaza. In a sane world, everybody who engages in material support of what Netanyahu is doing is engaged in a war crime. But there'll be no recompense for it. Nobody will be punished for it. Netanyahu may be thrown out of office because he's blowing it domestically, but nobody else is going to be punished for it. So our foreign policy, notwithstanding Trump's promises in his 3 campaigns for the presidency, is back to what Tom Woods said. No matter who you vote for, no matter what they say, you end up with John McCain.
Oh, I thought you were going to say George Bush. Yeah, we hear that. No matter who you vote for, you always end up with some Hillary Clinton or something like that.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Judge, you're fantastic. I love talking with you about these big brain things because there's really no one else that I can ask these kinds of questions to. because when we're discussing J.D. Vance, he made some really controversial comments recently, and he converted to Catholicism, I believe, in 2019. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance's conversion to Catholicism. He says he felt desperate for a worldview that understood our bad behavior as simultaneously social and individual, structural and moral, that recognize that we are products of our environment, that we have a responsibility to change that environment, but we are still moral beings with individual duties. And he described himself recently in an interview as post-liberal. I wonder if you've heard this phrase lately. This has been the way that the new right, the kind of Josh Hawley, MAGA Republican type people, have been describing themselves as post-liberal Republicans. They reject Ronald Reagan because he was too libertarian. And of course, libertarians reject Ronald Reagan because he wasn't libertarian enough.
He was too conservative? Yeah. I don't know what this post-liberal nonsense is, and I don't know what J.D. Vance's version of Catholicism is, but I do agree with Madonna, who said 2 days ago, Pope Leo should go to Gaza and challenge the Jews to attack him. That might put an end to the slaughter, or at least delay it for a few days.
Not the Madonna, but Madonna.
No, not the Blessed Mother. But
when you say Madonna and to reform the Catholic,
Madonna Marie Louise Saccone is her name. Born on August 15, which is the great feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Mother, which is probably why her Italian mother named her after the Blessed Mother.
Mm-hmm. So the model for what these post-liberals, how they describe themselves, is kind of like what DeSantis is doing, forcefully changing institutions, capturing institutions. The common themes that they have are things like encouraging childbearing, easing or removing church-state separation, banning pornography, or doing things like overturning Obergefell. Your thoughts on the push to overturn the gay marriage decision by SCOTUS, Judge?
Well, the right to choose a mate is a fundamental personal liberty, and the government has no business interfering with it. I'd be quite surprised if the court takes to this. These people that you have described are big government thugs that want the government to tell us how to live, and who believe that the government is the route to prosperity and freedom. To me and to you and to most people, I think, listening to us now, the government is the enemy. The government is a negation of liberty. Everything the government owns, it has stolen. Everything the government says is a lie, and these people idolize government as long as they're in it, as long as it's their government, as long as it's their version of big government. I oppose and criticize them as much as I oppose and criticize the guy whose office is right across the street from mine when the Senate is not in session, and occasionally we say hello to each other in the streets. Chuck Schumer.
Oh, no. That must make for awkward conversation on the subway.
I think I told you this story. I was in the first class compartment of a short flight from Reagan to LaGuardia, seated next to Al Sharpton, behind Bill O'Reilly, and in front of Chuck Schumer. So Schumer stands up. I know this sounds like a joke, but it's true. Schumer stands up and says, let's take a selfie. Nobody will believe that the four of us are friends. O'Reilly turns around and goes, that's because the four of us are not friends. And he refuses to take the selfie. And Sharpton says to me, is he always an asshole like that? And I said, yes, Reverend, he is. And I said it loud enough so Bill could hear me.
I still remember getting Bill O'Reilly angry because whenever I was in a good mood, I would sing a little bit in the office, and I think I got one of those anonymous emails about why I should shut up and just do my work in the office at Fox right across from him. So he was very curmudgeonly.
I remember that. Yeah. By the way, Mary Kate sends her regards to you. She was asking about you this morning.
Oh, thank you. Tell her I said hello, and let her know I have a beautiful little 1-year-old redheaded baby who is walking and talking these days. So
I told her about your baby.
Well, thank you.
I have to run in a couple of minutes. I don't know if there's anywhere else where you wanted to go.
Yeah, just real quick. I want you to preview your column. You talked about the chilling reality that the NSA captures virtually all communications in the U.S. without warrants. We can read this column at judgenap.com, but I'd love for you to give us a preview and maybe your show as well.
Donald Trump is the personal victim of government spying without search warrants. And yet, as the president of the United States, he permits it to happen. The spying without search warrants is de rigueur today. They don't even bother going to the FISA court any longer. So right now, the NSA captures every keystroke on every mobile device and every desktop and every phone call within the United States, into the United States, out of the United States. Now, they don't monitor it in real time because they don't have the resources for it. But if they want to know of a conversation that you and I had in 2019, they can go and pinpoint it in a couple of minutes. So the spying is on everybody all the time with utter disregard for the Fourth Amendment. I thought and hoped that under Trump, he would dial it back because he knows how horrible it is when the government does this to you, since it was done to him in 2015, 16, and even 17 while he was the president of the United States. He knows that the CIA spies on him, his own CIA. He knows that Mossad spies on him. He knows that the NSA spies on all of us. He does nothing to stop it. So periodically I write one of these rhetorical what if columns just to remind people that this is going on. Saturday, I will be doing a live Judging Freedom program from the Ron Paul Institute gathering at Dulles Airport with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Max Blumenthal, and Anya Parampil, who is Mrs. Max Blumenthal. We only have 30 minutes for the whole segment with 5 people that love to talk, so I have to do the best I can to
I was going to
them
say,
back.
I know that these are people who they all would take 30 minutes each themselves, but Judge,
right.
We'll definitely check that out for the live stream on Saturday, and your show, Judging Freedom, is downloaded on all podcasts. You're a regular guest since the very beginning of this show 3 years ago, and we will always have you here every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Central Time, Judge, if you'll have us. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Austin. God love you. All the best.
Thank you, Judge. You too. Bye.
Mayor Bowser may also know that there's an ongoing investigation in her police department over the potentially manipulation of those statistics, that there have been a downclassing of some of the crimes, there's been a massaging of the numbers and the reporting in order to fit them more beneficially into the FBI crime stats. So she may know some things that National Democrats are not paying attention to.
Maybe she does. The mayor doesn't know something that Democrats are not paying attention to in Washington, D.C. Yeah, even liberals want to be safe in Washington, D.C. Hey, guys, thank you so much for unlocking all the bonus content today. You're going to get to watch a mini documentary instead of the commercials as we go to our next guest, the Misfit Patriot. He's going to talk to us more about that post-liberalism that J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, is talking about. We're going to talk to him about that 10 minutes from now, but you guys unlocked both phases of the defense of the bonus content. So that means that you get to vote on which Defense Against the Dark Arts class that you guys would like to see. We have 7 votes so far, and they are 3 and 4. One, this will be taught, today's Dark Arts class will be taught by, slow down, Austin. Professor Mortimer Puffcap is preparing his spores, and then the forbidden lesson that he shall teach is up to you to vote. So I'm dropping the link right now in the Rumble chat so that you guys can vote. That is on our Discord, the poll. So if you're not a member of our Discord, go ahead and join it, and then you can vote in our poll today to choose which Defense Against the Dark Arts class you would like to have taught by Professor Mortimer Puffcap. Right now, it's 3 votes for the spore of subsidy addiction, and it's 4 votes for the root rot of regulatory capture. So check that out and make sure that you guys are voting in those polls. And thank you so much for unlocking that bonus content. So let's play the bonus content here in just a few minutes. I'm going to take a quick little break, guys. I've got to go pee for liberty. Hope you guys will too. Don't stick around. We'll be right back. Enjoy the bonus content. And we'll be back with the Misfit Patriot to talk about the rise of post-liberalism on the Wake Up America show's For Liberty Network. Andrew Cuomo's remarkably hypocritical attacks on Zohran Mamdani for living in a rent-stabilized apartment. Andrew Cuomo made New York rent control more favorable to the wealthy. Now he's going after Zohran Mamdani for living in a rent-stabilized apartment. The personal attacks in New York City's general mayoral election are hitting close to home. Over the past few days, Cuomo has repeatedly attacked Mamdani, who bested him already in the Democratic primary, for living in a rent-stabilized apartment despite earning a comfortable $140,000 as a New York assemblyman. Rent-Free newsletter by Christian Britschke. Get more of Christian's urban regulation, development, and zoning coverage. It's an abuse of the system, said Cuomo in a video clip posted to X on Sunday. He's proposed a new Zohran's law that would exclude higher-income earners from rent-stabilized apartments. His proposal would require it so that vacant, rent-stabilized units could only be taken over by tenants for whom the rent is at least 30% of their income. Today, I am proud to announce that I will be proposing Zohran's law, a law that will keep the rich out of New York's affordable housing. Zohran K. Mamdani. You say freeze the rent, but for who? Rich people like you? Hard-working, working-class New Yorkers are being pushed from PickTwitter.com, MMers JZ Kev. Mamdani's campaign has shot back that Cuomo is merely mudslinging. Mamdani himself told the New York editorial board back in February that he and his wife plan to move out of their $2,300 a month rent-stabilized apartment. Cuomo is right to note that there are no income restrictions on the vast majority of the roughly 1 million rent-stabilized units in New York City, where maximum rents and rent increases are capped by the city's Rent Guidelines Board. As Rent-Free covered last year, the law has allowed millionaires with second homes in the Hamptons to legally rent rent-stabilized apartments for hundreds of dollars a month in Manhattan. A comprehensive Wall Street Journal analysis from several years ago found that rent-stabilized tenants in wealthier areas of the city received the steepest discounts on rent. Critics have long argued that this lack of means testing is just more evidence of how poorly designed New York's rent stabilization law is. It nevertheless takes a lot of gall for Cuomo to attack Mamdani for benefiting from rent stabilization when he, as governor in 2019, signed reforms that made New York's rent stabilization law much more favorable to wealthy renters. Prior to 2019, landlords had a couple of avenues through which they could deregulate pricey rent-stabilized units. Occupied rent-stabilized units could be deregulated if legal rents rose above a certain threshold and a tenant's income was $200,000 or more. Vacant units could also be removed from rent stabilization if legal rents rose above a certain threshold. That rent threshold was $2,774.76 in 2019. The combined income of Mamdani and his wife likely puts them over that income threshold, although it would take a few years of legal rent increases before their rent cleared the threshold to allow for deregulation. While not full, direct means testing, these two provisions were intended to allow landlords to charge market rents to tenants who were making high incomes and/or could afford to rent a higher-priced unit. The Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, which Cuomo signed into law, eliminated both those avenues for removing rent-stabilized units from price controls. So now, no matter how high one's income goes or how high legal rent-stabilized rents rise, a rent-stabilized apartment can never be brought to market rates. The 2019 law also made a long list of other reforms limiting landlords' ability to raise rents after a vacancy, pass on the costs of building repairs and individual apartment improvements, or even take their properties off the rental market. The result has been a dramatic drop in the value of rent-stabilized buildings, a steady increase in buildings that can't legally charge enough to cover operating expenses, and an increase in vacant rent-stabilized apartments where legal rents can't cover needed maintenance. Mamdani is both benefiting from the rent stabilization and proposing to make it worse by freezing allowable rent increases. Back in June, the Rent Guidelines Board allowed rent increases of 3% on one-year leases and 4.5% on two-year leases. But Cuomo's proposed Zohran's law would also make life a lot harder for landlords by making rent stabilization even more restrictive still in the name of fairness. This summer isn't about sunscreen and safe spaces. It's about liberty, laughs, and looking like a red, white, and righteous badass. Welcome to the Summer of Freedom collection. Beach towels bold enough to trigger a liberal arts professor, tank tops louder than a 4th of July fireworks finale, and mugs that scream, "Don't tread on my caffeine." Whether you're storming the sandbar or just grilling like George Washington with a Bluetooth speaker, this is the gear that lets everyone know. You're not here to play woke. You're here to play cornhole with conviction. So crack open a cold one, fire up the freedom, and rock the merch that makes communists cry. The summer of freedom is here, and it's absolutely unapologetic. Napolitano giving his liberty take on our show. If you haven't already, please do click the like button. And if today's your first time watching the Wake Up America show, we'd love to have you be a regular guest. This show's schedule is live every 5, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. That's the Wake Up America show schedule. So if you click the follow button, you'll get a notification on your Rumble app, and then we will get to become best friends. All right, so it's 8:30 a.m. Central Time here in Jefferson City, Missouri. What's the weather looking like up there? Pull that up on the screen. 72 degrees, absolutely beautiful. The heart of Missouri, the heart of freedom. That's what we're all about here on the show. We don't like authoritarianism. Whether it's a left boot or a right boot on your neck makes no difference. My next guest feels the same. You know him as the Misfit Patriot. He's the host of the TMP, the Misfit Patriot podcast on Rumble. He's joining us from San Antonio, Texas. Zach's been known for being unapologetically blunt, poking holes in political hypocrisy, and not being afraid to ruffle feathers. Today we're going to talk about something that doesn't get addressed enough: the rise of what people call auth-right, or authoritarian right, how it shows up. It's that post-liberal movement, essentially, that I was talking about with Judge Napolitano. Zach's here joining us live right now, the Misfit Patriot. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Thank you. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day. Zach, when we talk about authoritarianism, I like to contrast things by pointing at the opposite. This show, we focus on Javier Milei of Argentina a lot. We're big fans of Javier Milei because he's doing the opposite of what a lot of right-wing people are doing these days. Mm-hmm. In contrast to people like, for example, Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, the conservatives, though, man, they love Nayib Bukele. And then when we look at Javier Milei, they're kind of like, oh yeah, he's kind of cool, he's okay, I guess, but they really love Nayib Bukele. What do people on the right admire so much about Nayib?
I have no idea, because I said this to I think it was either Elijah Schaffer or Owen Schroyer, who was sharing the Bukele is rounding up all the criminals and throwing them in jail, and I'm like, no, that's good, right? But he's doing it without due process in a lot of these cases, right? And if we right-wing authoritarianism is still authoritarianism, and like there's all these different kinds of authoritarianism, totalitarianism, right? There's socialism, communism. There's all this. The nationalism is even a lot of the new right, alt-right, woke right, dissident right, whatever you want to call them. They're espousing authoritarianism, which is essentially, I want the government to do everything I want against my political opponents or people that disagree with me. And I'm like, I'm more on your side, where I think Milei, I'm an afuera person. I want my government so small, my federal government, I want it so small I don't even know it exists. And I think that that's what the founders intended too. I think that limited government as opposed to more control is always a good thing for both sides. You don't want it used against you when it finally will be.
It seems as though the momentum is, no offense, not on our side. It seems that the right, at least the online right, which will be the Republicans of the future, the leaders of the future, they have gone hard right when it comes to their views. And when I say hard right, I mean, they openly are praising Adolf Hitler. The wrong guys lost the war in World War II. Winston Churchill was the bad guy, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. What's your reaction to that?
Exactly. You nailed it, right? So I say this all the time. I say, these people are not a problem, but they're only not a problem right now, because the online social media bubble that they're in, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it is really small. However, like you just pointed out, these are the Republicans of the future, right? And the reason why the left got so crazy was because they didn't have anybody on their side calling out their own ridiculous voices. This is how people like AOC got into power. You have voices like Harry Sisson who are like being unchecked, and eventually it will turn into something that cannot be controlled. So what my page has been about, especially since the election, has been calling out what I call the woke right. James Lindsay has a different definition of it. My definition of the woke right is essentially it's the group that has this this victim mentality. There's a people group who think that there's this force that's responsible for all of their problems, right? And they have globalists, Jews, right? Israel. There's somebody that's the reason why things are bad is some big entity, right? And it's no personal accountability. Their solution to their problem is, like you just said, authoritarianism. Their solution to their problem is nationalism. Their solution to their problem is the government doing it. And it's the same thing the left did, right? Woke just means awake to an idea that somebody is keeping you down. And the left, their bad guy was capitalism and white people, etc., rich people, and their solution is socialism. So it's basically the same ideology on two different sides of the political spectrum.
I've seen it too, and it's fascinating that this phenomenon has occurred because it's what we call horseshoe theory, where you have people like Ibram Kendi, who created the concepts for which, DEI and critical race theory, all of these concepts. He created the modern DEI institutions. And now so many on the authoritarian right are saying, actually, you know what? Ibram Kendi was right about a lot of things. And then the rest of us are sitting out here saying, this is ridiculous. You guys are the only thing that brings you two together or your hatred of the Jews.
It's so funny. Horseshoe theory, it really does apply. But at the same time, there is a lot of people who don't really fit into the necessary anti-Semitism thing. And it's more of like you have the people who are just sitting there going like, okay, I want the government to fix my problem. I want the government to this. Even a lot of people in MAGA are kind of espousing. I think you said like JD Vance was like, I'm like post liberalism. Yeah, post liberal. It's like this is the job of the government, the federal government. The job of the federal government should be just to keep us safe from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and and they should have some limited capacity as far as the day-to-day operations in different states. But what I'm more of is a constitutionalist, where I'm like, okay, I want state rights. I want a lot of my local governments to be doing a lot more. I think that the problem that this whole country has shifted towards is we think that we're going to change the country every 4 years by going to a building one time and writing a name down on a ballot, right? Where it's like, why are you not getting involved in your local politics, your local communities? Well, who's on your school board? Who's your mayor? Who's your elected representative in your district? And this is the problem. It's we're looking for this lazy, like one size fits all solution to a very complex, diverse country of a bunch of different ideas and ideologies.
Well, why do you think that the Zoomers are so angry? I mean, I can understand being angry at your government for lots of reasons, but it seems as if their anger is not misplaced, but aimed at the wrong targets in so many ways, right? Have you noticed this about you get the Zoomer stare, you're like, yeah, actually, millennials also snowflake generation that's oppressed or uniquely is struggling. Every culture is struggling. So you get all these look what they took from us videos of like women from the 1980s with great tits, and it's kind of like we still have women with excellent bajungas here. But the problem it seems to be is that a lot of this, and I wonder if you agree with this, I think a lot of this is an outgrowth psychologically, the fact that these young people aren't drinking and they aren't having sex. And they're criticizing people like us in our generation for smoking, drinking, gambling, having sex. And they're very puritanical. They're very Catholic. They're very inspired by philosophies and ideologies that have turned them into, many of them, inceldom. There's a joke that we sometimes make here on the show, which is that Nick Fuentes' America First movement, the Groyper movement dies as soon as Nick Fuentes gets laid. Do you agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I just don't know if it's going to be by a male or a female. I mean, if he came out of the,
I'm not going to pull a Tucker Carlson and call him a gay kid here and say, but the war between that is an interesting thing to kind of bring up. Is that it's interesting now to see how Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens have adopted a shtick. I haven't agreed with Nick Fuentes much until lately. I heard him talk like criticizing them, and I was like, you know what? You're right. They are actually running his playbook. I don't know if you saw the South Park episode. Interestingly, they had a character that was kind of supposed to be Nick Fuentes, but in essence, Tucker and Candace Owens are running Nick Fuentes' playbook, aren't they?
So here's the hilarious part, right? First of all of these people are garbage. They're all clout chasers and grifters, right? But their criticisms of each other are actually correct, right? And like, so it's like they don't really.
They're not right about anything but what they say about each other.
It's so weird how they cannot see that what they are doing is giving themselves criticism about themselves by directing it at people who are just like them, right? And like to your earlier point, I just wanted to say really quick, like this whole the Zoomer generation being upset. It's like the difference between I would say that every generation thinks that the younger generation is, more dumber and radical and everything. And I know that you did touch base on this more like Christian movement. There's like a Chat GPT Christian movement out now with this lazy generation. But anyway, to summarize, I think the difference between this generation and all the priors before it, when the boomers were talking about the hippies and everything and all them. I think this generation, it's the participation trophy effect, right? I think that the participation trophy effect has been one of the worst things that's ever happened to cultural society. And it's not just in America, it's everywhere. It's when we stopped rewarding people for doing things. And I think that it's this, obviously the internet has played a big part in it too, with keeping people inside and disconnecting by being more connected, which has, I think, inspired the whole incel thing. But anyway, to wrap it up, I just wanted to say, I really do believe that participation trophy generation is what's happening. I also do think that this cycle will break. The famous Joe Rogan quote, which isn't even a Joe Rogan quote, it's a Jordan Peterson quote about somebody else, but it's, weak times create hard men, et cetera, et cetera. As far as Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, all this stuff, what they are saying about each other is correct. What they're doing is they're going, okay, this is what happens in the grifter community. Okay, this is what happens in the narcissistic social media influencer or attention-seeking behavior community, right? It's like these people are eating each other, and they will eat each other every single time. You see this a lot on TikTok. You see these friends that become enemies, then they become frenemies, and they create these little online beefs. And it's because if they're not the center of attention, if somebody else is getting the center of attention, they have to retake the attention, so they're going to start eating each other. And it's the same thing that the left did to each other. If you're not as radical as me, right, you're an outsider. The left will push themselves out of their own party. And they did. And I think that that's what's going to happen with the woke right movement. But I think it's going to happen a lot faster. I think it's going to be streamlined because we have people like me, you, and others who are pointing it out. But it's on our side.
I have a great idea. You just gave me a great idea, Zach. You know what we should do is we should start it right here. Is right now we should start a fake online beef with each other. But what we should do, and as an experiment to see how much it stirs people up online, and they, until we get found out and they find this clip, and but it'll be based on the fact that we're agreeing with each other, but we don't agree with each other hard enough, and just see how much it gets us. We'll be rich.
Yeah, well, so I mean, and think of the actual substance of their arguments against each other, right? These are conspiratorial people. These people there's always a they out there, and now they're creating conspiracies against each other while they promote conspiracies against other people. They are literally conspiracy theorists creating conspiracy theorists about conspiracy theorists. Right? So it's
no, that's the thing, bro. And listen, I'm a big fan of conspiracy theories because I love reading about them to try and figure them out like a puzzle, right, and debunk them. But what you'll always find is that in every conspiracy theory, everyone's at the end of the day, they always go back to the Jews.
Oh yeah.
Everything eventually. That's why I saw this really great reel the other day where there was this skinhead and he was on a date with a girl and she was figuring out She's like, when she realizes that you both hate Israel, but for different reasons. And she's the leftist. She's the leftist,
Oh, they're driving. They're driving. Yeah.
They're driving together. And he's like looking at her. She's like, he's the skinhead and she's the leftist. But it is a sad commentary on how far we have fallen from where conservatives' roots really lie with, which is, in my opinion, it's with libertarianism. Of course, libertarianism created and pioneered by Jews and Jewish intellectuals, which is why, of course, so many fascists and leftists and right-wing authoritarians, people like that, always have hated libertarianism. They always kill the classical liberals first. But I wonder, I'll give you the last word here, Misfit, and say just kind of, if you could look in your crystal ball. I mean, where do you think this all ends? Nick Fuentes gets laid and the movement falls apart, or he stays a virgin forever and America turns into World War III and he's Hitler.
No, I honestly think, I don't want to minimize how serious it is, because it is a pretty serious problem when you have people that are gaining popularity who are openly espousing Hitler ideals. And but I also want to be a little bit more, pragmatic about it. I live in reality, right? You walk down the street, walk down in a well-populated area, ask 50 people who Nick Fuentes is, they don't fucking know, right? This is contained online. He is not popular. And I don't want to even go down the road of it's all bots, because it's not all bots. He has a pretty big following, but it's just not that big, right? If you think about it, I did this with somebody else. I won't drag this out too long, but essentially, when you look at the statistics of how many users are on X, right, how many American users are on X, and then you take the calculated estimated amount of bot activity, right, we're talking about maybe a couple of million. I'm sorry, I'm not talking about on X. I'm talking about the fans of Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens. These people, it's so much smaller than and I'm talking drastically smaller than the trans movement, which became a big problem, right? So you got to cut it. A lot of it is
to do with foreign ops as well. A lot of it is psyops.
100%.
A lot of it are our enemies just sowing discord here in the United States.
I think Elon is throwing a lot of gasoline on it too, intentionally or unintentionally. And I really hope, I think that would be a good solution to this problem, is to somebody really sit him down and go, do you understand that you are potentially the catalyst for the destruction of this country, right? Because he is allowing a lot, and I'm not saying that you should censor, right? But a very simple solution, a massive win for America would be for him to just figure out how to get rid of bot activity. It's really not that hard. Instagram has done a lot better of a job at it. I'm not giving praise to Mark Zuckerberg, but it's a lot better than X. When you have the biggest social media platform that is being motivated by bot activity and foreign bot farms, and even a lot of sock accounts and disruptors and bad actors, they can change the narrative. They can change the conversation of America from a place like Pakistan. So he should definitely look into that and figure out how to at least tamp down, not on regular people's free speech, but shutting up robots. I don't think that that's a violation of the First Amendment.
No, certainly not. And I would love, the thing that I think would fix a lot of the problems on X is, if I could sit down Elon Musk and talk to him, is just to say, to make it so that we can find out the country of origin of the people who are talking. I would just like to know if the people, and my guess is as many as 25 to 30% of the Patriot accounts that you see and the American right, the more, especially when it's the obvious AI picture of a chick, and she's pro MAGA first, and everything is about foreign policy and Israel and all this stuff. And it's kind of we know for sure, at least I know, that those are definitely ops. Go ahead.
Real quick, if you think about it, how many of these, anti-Israel, anti-Jew disruptor accounts are real? I'm talking about the big accounts, right? You're talking about the entire conversation about this whole anti-Israel narrative is being pushed by maybe a dozen content creators. The rest, their followers, are all anonymous nobodies, right? So how is it statistically likely that of 90% of the people that agree with you are just an anonymous under 500 follower troll account, right? More regular people would be talking about it if it really was that big of a movement.
Yeah. Interesting. Misfit Patriot, first time ever having a conversation. You've got a lot of haters, but it looks like you got some supporters out there too. And it was a great conversation. I hope we can do so.
Thanks, bro.
More. Maybe we can talk in your podcast. Tell us where we can find it.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. I would love to have you on. I do rumble.com/TMP uncensored. Try to do that Tuesdays through Thursdays at 7 a.m. Central. And I'm also on X and Instagram.
There you go. On X and Instagram, the Misfit Patriot, our first public conversation. If you see me talking shit at you later today, Misfit Patriot, it's just the start of our internet beef where I'll be talking shit on you because I agree with you on something. We're going to sell it. Confusing. Have a good one, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right.
There you go. That's Zack, the Misfit Patriot. We're glad to have him join us on the show. I like to hear from people that you don't hear from all the time. All right, folks. Well, we hit the $100 goal. That means it's time to head deep beneath the marble halls of the Capitol. It's time for us to teach a class for defense against the dark arts. We're going down into the forgotten tunnels now, through a heavy oak door marked with strange ruins, into the lecture hall of a very old and very wise mushroom. His name is Professor Mortimer Puffcap. He's a centuries-old sentient fungus who first sprouted in the damp timber of a Boston tavern in 1720. He's been around for every liberty victory and every government overreach since he's been quietly absorbing history like compost and storing it in his spores. His enemies are tyrants and bureaucrats and the great killer of free markets, regulatory capture. And today, the professor is here to explain how industries start out scrappy and then innovate and then eventually wrap their roots around the state and make laws that protect them, not you. Gather close, my apprentices, and prepare yourself for the root rot of regulatory capture. We're going to go on standby as we head our way, and I cast a magical spell. I cast Magic Missile. And we'll be right back on the Wake Up America show with our Defense Against the Dark Arts class.
Young sprouts, welcome. You smell of curiosity and perhaps a little fear. Good. It means your minds are still alive. Today's lesson is about rot. Not the noble decay that feeds the forest floor, but the parasitic rot that chokes the life out of liberty. We call it regulatory capture. What is regulatory capture, students? Regulatory capture happens when the watchdogs meant to protect the public start working for the wolves. The very agencies tasked with regulating an industry become servants of that industry's biggest players. Economist George Stigler, who studied this fungus of corruption, won the Nobel Prize in 1982 for showing how regulation often benefits the regulated more than the public. His finding? Industries don't hate regulation. They love it, as long as they can write it. Consider the Interstate Commerce Commission, founded in 1887 to keep railroads from gouging farmers with high rates. At first, it barked and bit, but over time, the railroads learned how to feed it. By the 1920s, the ICC was controlled by the railroads themselves, using regulation to block competition from trucking companies. The watchdog became the lapdog. Look to the FDA. In theory, it protects us from unsafe drugs. In practice, pharmaceutical giants lobby for complex approval processes that small startups can't afford, locking in their market share. According to a 2018 Mercatus Center study, larger drug companies spend millions to influence FDA rules that just happen to shut out their smaller rivals. The incentives are baked into the soil in which we all live. Regulators need industry expertise to do their jobs, so they hire from within industry. Industry leaders, in turn, promise cushy post-government jobs for regulators who play nice. The cycle tightens until the agency's roots and the industry's roots are tangled together in a knot you can't tell apart. Once upon a time, the Civil Aeronautics Board decided which airlines could fly where and what they could charge. New competition? Denied. Low fares? Discouraged. The result? High prices, fewer routes, and fat profits for established airlines. The CAB wasn't regulating for the people. It was regulating against them. It took deregulation in 1978, led by Democrats like Ted Kennedy and economists like Alfred Kahn, to finally rip out that route. This rot is not just wasteful. It's an attack on the free market. When government and industries join forces, they don't produce better goods. They produce barriers to keep you out. Every new regulation written by the captured is a spore released into the air, slowly suffocating the forest of competition. How do you fight back, students? 1. How to spot it, students. Rules that favor big players when compliance costs are so high that only corporations can play. Revolving door hires. Regulators and executives swapping jobs like dance partners. Laws named for consumers that help corporations. Consumer Protection Acts that somehow protect profits instead. The cost to you. A 2013 study by the Competitive Enterprise Institute estimated the total cost of federal regulation at $1.86 trillion per year, more than the GDP of Canada. How much of that is pure capture? Enough to keep prices high, innovation slow, and small competitors crushed before they sprout. What to do about it? Here's how you fight back. Sunset clauses. Regulations should expire unless actively renewed. Track meetings between regulators and industry lobbyists. Demand transparency. Deregulate strategically. Don't remove health and safety protections, but strip away barriers designed only to block competition. Privatize where possible. The less government controls, the less there is to capture. Young sprouts, remember, in the forest, decay feeds life. But in the state, rot feeds only the rotters. Guard the roots of liberty, for once they are entangled with power, you will not easily pull them free.
Wow, that was fantastic. And congratulations to Ike Givenashits, who killed his interview this morning. Thanks, brother. I know you're going to get it, bud. Some people are asking questions they shouldn't be asking. Why so many people... how come all the Defense Against the Dark Arts professors have mustaches? Excuse me? Excuse me? How do you guys like the show? Enjoyable? 10 out of 10? Can't say I'm not trying to entertain. So thankful to have you guys here. And we'll also say thank you to Professor Puffcap. Wise as always, probably the only mushroom in history to quote George Stigler without getting sauteed. This is why the fight for liberty isn't just about cutting taxes or shrinking budgets. It's about protecting the soil from the rot that lets government and corporations merge into one ugly tree of tyranny. So if you want more classes like this, you guys, you know what to do. Keep supporting the show. Keep those Rumble rants coming, and make sure that you visit the Griff Shop on your way out. We'll keep sending you down the rabbit hole, or in this case today, the mushroom patch. We'll be so thankful to see you guys again here tomorrow. Wake Up America shows Thursday. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you guys tomorrow on the Wake Up America shows for Liberty Network. Bye, guys.
Cuomo's remarkably hypocritical attacks on Zohran Mamdani for living in a rent-stabilized apartment. Andrew Cuomo made New York rent control more favorable to the wealthy. Now he's going after Zohran Mamdani for living in a rent-stabilized apartment. The personal attacks in New York City's general mayoral election are hitting close to home. Over the past few days, Cuomo has repeatedly attacked Mamdani, who bested him already in the Democratic primary, for living in a rent-stabilized apartment despite earning a comfortable $140,000 as a New York assemblyman. Rent-Free newsletter by Christian Britschke. Get more of Christian's urban regulation, development, and zoning coverage. It's an abuse of the system, said Cuomo in a video clip posted to X on Sunday. He's proposed a new Zohran's Law that would exclude higher-income earners from rent-stabilized apartments. His proposal would require it so that vacant, rent-stabilized units could only be taken over by tenants for whom the rent is at least 30% of their income. Today, I am proud to announce that I will be proposing Zohran's Law, a law that will keep the rich out of New York's affordable housing. Zohran K. Mamdani, you say freeze the rent, but for who? Rich people like you? Hard-working, working-class New Yorkers are being pushed from PickTwitter.com, MMers JZ Kev. Mamdani's campaign has shot back that Cuomo is merely mudslinging. Mamdani himself told the New York editorial board back in February that he and his wife plan to move out of their $2,300 a month rent-stabilized apartment. Cuomo is right to note that there are no income restrictions on the vast majority of the roughly 1 million rent-stabilized units in New York City, where maximum rents and rent increases are capped by the city's Rent Guidelines Board. As Rent-Free covered last year, the law has allowed millionaires with second homes in the Hamptons to legally rent rent-stabilized apartments for hundreds of dollars a month in Manhattan. A comprehensive Wall Street Journal analysis from several years ago found that rent-stabilized tenants in wealthier areas of the city received the steepest discounts on rent. Critics have long argued that this lack of means testing is just more evidence of how poorly designed New York's rent stabilization law is. It nevertheless takes a lot of gall for Cuomo to attack Mamdani for benefiting from rent stabilization when he, as governor in 2019, signed reforms that made New York's rent stabilization law much more favorable to wealthy renters. Prior to 2019, landlords had a couple of avenues through which they could deregulate pricey rent-stabilized units. Occupied rent-stabilized units could be deregulated if legal rents rose above a certain threshold and a tenant's income was $200,000 or more. Vacant units could also be removed from rent stabilization if legal rents rose above a certain threshold. That rent threshold was $2,774.76 in 2019. The combined income of Mamdani and his wife likely puts them over that income threshold, although it would take a few years of legal rent increases before their rent cleared the threshold to allow for deregulation. While not full, direct means testing, These two provisions were intended to allow landlords to charge market rents to tenants who were making high incomes and/or could afford to rent a higher-priced unit. The Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, which Cuomo signed into law, eliminated both those avenues for removing rent-stabilized units from price controls. So now, no matter how high one's income goes or how high legal rent-stabilized rents rise, a rent-stabilized apartment can never be brought to market rates. The 2019 law also made a long list of other reforms limiting landlords' ability to raise rents after a vacancy, pass on the costs of building repairs and individual apartment improvements, or even take their properties off the rental market. The result has been a dramatic drop in the value of rent-stabilized buildings, a steady increase in buildings that can't legally charge enough to cover operating expenses, and an increase in vacant rent-stabilized apartments where legal rents can't cover needed maintenance. Mamdani is both benefiting from the rent stabilization and proposing to make it worse by freezing allowable rent increases. Back in June, the Rent Guidelines Board allowed rent increases of 3% on one-year leases and 4.5% on two-year leases. But Cuomo's proposed Zoran's Law would also make life a lot harder for landlords by making rent stabilization even more restrictive still in the